Okay, welcome to the Apple Podcast. This is Lex at maxfuture.com, and this is episode 73, May 27, 2011, and this is a commercial-free podcast. And let's get to a whole bunch of interesting Apple news this week. Okay, so the week started off with a very interesting development in Apple stores. And the big development in Apple stores is that Apple now has totally revamped its stores. So instead of having paper displays next to all the hardware in the Apple stores, Apple has replaced the paper displays saying what a Macintosh costs and what the Macintosh features are, or what an iPod's features are, and it's replaced it with iPads. So there are these special iPads that are embedded in like this plastic glass-like wedges that are the kiosks almost, and the iPads are made to only run in sort of a display mode of an electronic brochure almost that has the information for what's being sold. So for example, the brochure, which has a common theme among all products, has specific information about a Macintosh when it's a Macintosh product that it's in front of, or it might have information regarding an iPod when it's near the iPod touches or the iPhones. And these iPod kiosks are set so that you can't really use the home button to get into other applications. But it's very cool technology, and I took a tour of it this Sunday at the Fifth Avenue Apple Store in New York City. And I think it's going to do a number of things. One, it's going to make it easier to get information about the products because there's much more information in these electronic brochures than in the paper displays that you had. So, for example, you can go in and quickly see all the different features of all the different Macintoshes when you're in front of one Macintosh and you click on this iPad display. The other thing it's going to do, it's going to make it easier for customers to get service because built into each iPad is a request for help. And what I'm told is that when you press that, that goes into an electronic queue, and people in the store know that at a certain station there's a customer waiting to discuss buying or asking questions about a particular product. So that's the second great utility of this, is that there's better customer service. The third thing I think it's going to do is help sell iPads because it's going to expose the iPad to people who don't come into the store looking for iPads. Remember, Apple sells a lot of things other than iPads, such as Macintoshes, such as iPhones, such as iPod touches, such as custom bags for your Macintosh. And with all these iPads sort of embedded in these glass or plastic slabs on all these tables, customers who come in are going to see the iPad, and they're not going to have to go to an iPad section. Any part of the store is going to have all these iPads. So this was a major revamping of how all the Apple stores, the retail stores, do business. And, it's truly innovative, and I can see maybe Apple, the fourth thing that could happen is Apple could sell this technology to other retail stores because the iPad kiosk concept could be used in any retail store where there are things on display. Like a watch store could use an embedded iPad kiosk to sell watches. Similarly, a bookstore could have a kiosk like this to browse books. So, that's how the week started with that excitement. A lot of people thought there was going to be something else coming out that Sunday. This came out on Sunday, the 22nd of May 2011. And some people, including me, were thinking, well, maybe there's going to be new products coming out. Maybe Final Cut Pro would be released that day, or maybe the Lion operating system would be released. But in the end, it turned out to be the big news was that there was going to be this electronic iPad display in every retail store. Okay, the other big news at the beginning of the week is that Apple entered the whole Lotsasst controversy. Now, Lotsasst controversy, which we talked about last week, is where this company that claims to have patents on certain technology related to software or the internet started suing or threatening to sue small app developers for the iPhone and the iPad. Specifically, Lotsasst claimed to have a patent on the whole concept of in-app purchases. And in-app purchases is an API that Apple has built into the iOS for the iPad and iPhone, and a lot of developers have taken advantage of that for their apps. So the week before, Lotsasst started sending letters to in-app developers saying that they had to pay up and pay a licensing fee or stop using in-app purchases, saying that concept of in-app purchasing was patented by Lotsasst. And this really upset a lot of small developers. One, they don't have the money to engage in litigation over patents. That can be very costly. And two, it just seems kind of crazy, particularly since Apple has developed this API. You'd think Apple would have their backs. Well, this week, after maybe a week of no word from Apple other than Apple saying that it's looking at the situation, Apple's legal department sent a letter to Lotsasst and its CEO, and Apple said to Lotsasst that its existing license for patents covering in-app purchases applies to all iOS app makers as well. And so what Apple is doing is it's joining the fray and sending a very loud and powerful message to this company that some people consider to be a patent troll. And Apple is basically saying, if you want to pick a fight, don't pick a fight with the little app developers. Pick a fight with Apple, because Apple may have a basis to sue you. And so a lot of little app developers were very happy about this. The letter from Apple's general counsel, which runs 3 pages, has a lot of interesting stuff. In it, Apple says, under its license, Apple is entitled to offer these licensed products and services to its customers and business partners, who in turn have the right to use them. Sewell's letter from Apple also says to Lotsasst, under your reading of the claim as set out in your letters, the allegedly infringing acts require the use of Apple's APIs to provide two-way communication, the transmission of an Apple ID, and other services to permit access for the user to the App Store and the use of Apple's hardware, iOS, and servers. So basically, Apple's saying that developers aren't infringing Lotsasst patents because they're using Apple's software and hardware to provide the functionality. Now, one of the things that Lotsasst had said is that Apple has licensed its patent. Apparently, Lotsasst bought the patent from some other patent pool that Apple had licensed it from. So basically, Apple's basically saying, look, since Apple licensed the product or the patent, and Apple has issued the iOS that small developers are using that have this API, then that licensing arrangement by Apple covers third-party developers. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Lotsasst backs down. Apple clearly has the resource and the legal powerhouse to go after Lotsasst and protect the small developers. And I think Apple has to do that, because this could harm Apple's business if small developers are scared to use Apple's APIs and develop apps. When a small developer develops an app for Apple's iOS, there's the assumption that Apple has all the patents and licenses to implement the APIs. And it would be really detrimental to Apple if third parties could go after developers and scare them off from developing under Apple's iOS. So all in all, this is a great development It's a great development for small developers for Apple's iPhone and the iPad, but it's also something that Apple has to do to protect its business. It can't allow third-party developers to threaten its small developers because that would just harm Apple's business. So the other big enhancement this week was that Apple released an update to its app store, its online store app for the Mac and for the iPad. This is the Apple Store app, and before you didn't really have much choice when ordering hardware like a Macintosh or something from this app. You just had to get the default Macintoshes. You couldn't configure them with extra RAM or larger hard drives or upgrade the processor. You were sort of stuck with the base models. And Apple has updated the app so that you can now customize and make custom configuration of Macs through the app that you have on your iPhone or iPad. And this is clearly a great step in the right direction. It would be nice if they added some other features. For example, if you're entitled to a school discount, or if you're a government worker, or you have something, some sort of discount on the web through a computer, you can go to a special section of the Apple online store and get a small discount. So you can't do that still through the apps, but you can configure the Macs or the iPhones or the iPods. Actually, it's mainly the Macs that you buy. You can configure them to the same way you would on the web. So this is a big development. Frankly, the more you can do something like this on an iPad or iPhone, the closer it becomes to replacing your Mac. So this is a great step in the right direction. Okay, a lot of people think that new MacBook Airs will be coming out soon this summer, simply because it's been a long time since the MacBook Air was upgraded late last summer or early fall last year. And what will the MacBook Air bring? Well, 9 to 5 Mac had a story out on May 27th, and it's reporting that there's a rumor that Apple has an A5-powered MacBook Air with Thunderbolt in and out connections in the labs. What's the big picture? And 9 to 5 Mac is referring to a blog called Mako Takara from Japan, which had previously accurately outlined some of the iPad 2 features. And this Japanese blog's latest story claims that an A5-powered MacBook Air with Thunderbolt is being tested in Apple's labs. So that would be, interesting if that came out. Now, what does that mean, an A5-powered MacBook Air? The processor that the MacBook Airs are currently using are Intel processors, dual core. And the question is, what kind of processors will the MacBook Airs have in the next version? They could go to the quad core or the dual core i7, i5, i3. The real challenge for Apple is getting a processor that's speedy but doesn't take up too much power and generate too much heat, because the MacBook Airs are very thin and very light. Well, and the iPad has really long battery life, and it has now this dual core sort of custom-made A5 chip. And so the blog Makatakara is basically saying that they think that there's going to be a MacBook Air, or at least Apple's testing a MacBook Air using the chip that's in the iPad. Now, I don't know if that's powerful enough for a Mac. The rumor about Thunderbolt makes total sense, because Apple has been using this much faster and futuristic Thunderbolt connection in first the update for the MacBook Pros, then in the update for the iMacs. So clearly the entire line is going to get the Thunderbolt connections, which is going to be really great, because with Thunderbolt, a MacBook Air could really connect to monitors and hard drives externally, all with just one connection. and have it be lightning fast. So I don't know. I mean, I'm interested in getting the next version of the MacBook Air. I really think that it's going to be more powerful than the current MacBook Air, and it's going to have more features. Maybe it'll have more storage using the SSD drives. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Apple transitions away from Intel computers to these A5 or ARM designed chips. Okay, another app that got a major upgrade this week that affects Apple is the Square app. Now, Square is that company that makes a dongle for the iPhone and the iPad that turns it into a credit card reader, and it has an app that works with the dongle so that if you're selling stuff and want to take credit card transactions, you can do so by swiping a customer through the dongle connected to the iPhone or iPad and then having them sign on the screen of the iPhone or iPad. Well, Square recently updated its app, and it basically has created in the iPad version of it something called Square Register. And what Square is seeking to do is have the iPad replace traditional cash registers with iPads equipped with the new Square Register application. And according to Square, the app will allow businesses to easily customize the register interface with their full list of products. And in addition, according to Mac Rumors, analytic tools will allow businesses to see up-to-the-minute details on sales performance broken down by any number of metrics to help businesses study sales trends. And basically, the register functionality comes as an update to the iPad version of the company's Universal App Store app. So the other thing that's really cool about the Square app is that from the customer perspective, Square is rolling out something called Card Case, which is a virtual business cards that allow customers to view details of their favorite businesses, directly accessing live updated menus and product listings from the card, as well as transaction histories with item level detail. This is what Mac Rumors is saying. Now, basically, this replaces loyalty cards and credit card payment methods. So the Square cards will allow a customer to establish a relationship with a business and pay for goods without having to carry a wallet, a mechanism that Square CEO Jack Dorsey says is meant to, it's like having a permanent tab with a business. Now, right now, there's only a few companies here and there in, I guess, 50 companies altogether, merchants located in New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and Los Angeles, who have this capability of giving you a card case. In New York, it's mainly just a handful of like coffee shops. So basically, you activate, you get this card case by, I guess, visiting a store and then activating your Square app and using your credit card and getting an email or something. So I haven't figured out the mechanics of it. I have a Square app. I need to really go to one of these companies that offers it. And it's going to be a crowded field because a lot of people, including Apple, are going to enter into this wirelessly paying method of doing transactions. And we'll see later on that there's a story about Google rolling out just yesterday the ability to make near-field communication transactions from an Android phone. This is something that people talked about Apple doing for some time. So Square enters, a very highly competitive and crowded field, and this Square app is good for both merchants and customers. Okay, so the big news that I mentioned regarding Google is that Google announced this week something that Apple's going to really care about. On May 26, Google came out with an announcement that it's coming out with something called the Google Wallet. And what it is, it's a near-field communication system that works with the Android phones. And basically, it says here in in Cult of Mac that at first Google will just be partnering with MasterCard, and so it'll work on these near-field communication receptive devices many cash registers or near cash registers have that work with MasterCard. And it will allow a Google Wallet to be used at hundreds of thousands of existing PayPass terminals. So basically, at the beginning, Google is going to have some prepaid cards which can be funded by any credit card, and they're going to give people a $10 sign-up bonus and no transaction fees. So there's like a little bit of a bribe to get you to use this, $10. And also Google will be launching something called Google Offers, which is a virtual couponing service tightly linked to the wallet. So you'll be able to have store clippings of offers or deals at various merchants in Google Wallet, and they'll show up in your Google Wallet app. So this is kind of huge. And basically, the Sprint's Nexus S4G was going to come with near-field communication technology in it this summer. So that's going to be, I guess, the first phone to have it. But this is something that Apple's been rumored to be working on, which is to have near-field communication built into the next iPhone and have some sort of payment system built in. So this is clearly another shot across the bow of Apple by Google, because this is something Apple could be threatened by. I mean, Google is getting involved in music, streaming, in selling phones. It's basically entering Apple's space, and it's a big competitor of Apple's. And the thing is, Apple needs to put near-field communication in, because if consumers find near-field communication useful in Android phones, that might give Android an edge over the iPhone. In other words, if I know I don't have to carry a credit card around, just an iPhone or an Android phone, I'm more likely to use that kind of device. So, the big question is when is Apple going to come out with near-field communication? Now, Apple has been cozying up to Square. A lot of the Square devices are now sold in Apple stores, and you can get the Square dongle from Apple for free, essentially. So maybe what's going on is Apple's having problem building near-field communication into the iPhone and is looking at Square as a stopgap. I mean, it's quite possible with its cash hoard of, $60 billion plus dollars, maybe Apple will buy Square and then use the Square technology together with any NFC technology that it builds into the iPhone. That would be really cool. What if Apple built a dongle into the iPhone? Or what if Apple, for example, could build a better hardware dongle for the iPhone if it owns Square. So I don't know. This could be very interesting. Maybe Apple will use Square or some other service to be integrated with the iPhone to compete with this Google Wallet. So we'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting summer and an interesting year. So competition is coming to Apple not just from Google, but also we know from Amazon. Because Amazon a couple of weeks ago came out with that digital cloud locker that you can now get on Amazon, which allows you to store your music on Amazon, and also any music or movies that you buy from Amazon go to this locker and are stored for free so you can stream later. So Amazon's putting on the heat on Apple, and actually two things happened this week that were pretty interesting. Well, first, this didn't happen first. First, Amazon on, I think it was Monday, 2011, May 23rd, Amazon out of the blue basically said that it was offering Lady Gaga's new album in MP3 form, which has 14 tracks for a mere 99 cents. So for $1, you could download the whole album. But more importantly, when Amazon rolled out this digital locker, Amazon basically said they would give people 5 gigabytes free to upload music or whatever. Any new music would not count towards that 5 gigabytes of storage. And if you bought an album, you'd get automatically 20 gigabytes of storage for 1 year. Well, Amazon cleverly offered Lady Gaga's brand new album, for 99 cents. And, I'm not exactly a big Lady Gaga fan, but that's an incredible price. So I bought it, and I immediately got 20 gigabytes, and I had the music go to this digital locker. And also, once it's in a digital locker, you can also download it. So it's not like you're just stuck streaming the music forever. Amazon gives you the option to download it. But this was a very clever promotion by Amazon, because obviously Apple's going to come out with some sort of music streaming service, and Amazon is getting people to get this digital locker by selling stuff really cheaply. So that's, the first shot across the bow from Amazon. The other shot across the bow was later this week, Amazon just quietly released a Mac software store that on Amazon's site, a Mac app store, where you can purchase and download Macintosh software and install it on your Macintosh. Now, this is pretty amazing, because up till now there were just various third-party sites or from developers that you could buy software and download it and install it, and Apple came out with its own Mac App Store. Well, Amazon now has a Mac App Store, which is basically the web. And there's a number of software items and video games that are listed there. Like if you go there now, you can get Microsoft Office for the Mac, which you cannot get in the Mac App Store. You can get it on Amazon Store. And what's interesting is you can download it. So that costs Office Mac costs $115 if you download it, 1 user, 3 installs. You can also get the business version of Office Mac for $199. Other products that they have listed there include Call of Duty 4 by Asprey for $24.95. You can get QuickBooks from Intuit for $165.02. So, this is, again, another major competitor of Apple's basically saying, we're willing to enter your space. In terms of the best sellers right now, the Office Mac for home is the number one download. So we'll have to see what competition is good because it gives you more choices. And so if you're a Mac user, now you have the Mac App Store, you have the Amazon website for downloads, and there's a lot of third-party developers that you have. So what will Apple's online streaming music service look like? Well, nobody knows, and a lot of people think that Apple's going to announce it at WWDC, which starts the week after next. But the website Engadget basically came out with a story on May 27th, today, saying that they have some of the details of Apple's iCloud music service. And basically, one key thing that they say is going to come that Amazon and Google do not have is the ability to automatically mirror your iTunes library using high-quality tracks. Actually, that's two things. So what is mirroring? Well, right now, the online music services that Google and Amazon offer are missing one thing, which is how do you get the music that you already have that's on your computer up there in the cloud? Now, both of Amazon and Google require you to upload to your digital locker the music you already have on your computer. And this is extremely time-consuming, as most people do not have fast upstream loading abilities. For example, I have high-speed internet access at home through Time Warner Cable, which allows me 31 megabits per second downloading. But my upload speed is less than 1 megabit per second. And so it'll take weeks, if not months, Actually, it'll take months for me to upload my 100 gigabytes of music. Now, Google's is lacking in another respect. You can't buy any music from Google and then add it to your digital locker. You can only store your music there. Amazon allows you to buy music from Amazon and have it added to your digital locker. But Amazon does not have the ability to mirror what's already on your computer. And this is something Engadget says is something that Apple's going to have, because Apple's going to have licensed that from the music companies. And what that means is the theory is that Apple knows what's on your computer because you have it in iTunes. And so Apple's going to scan your music in iTunes, and even if you didn't buy the music from Apple, Apple can figure out what it is. And the rumor is that Apple's going to then offer a service where, without you uploading the music you have on your computer, you're going to have it on the cloud, and that you're going to be able to stream it and play it on any iOS device or any Macintosh. Now, mind you, this is just a rumor, and the rumor is that it's going to be part of the annual MobileMe fee. So MobileMe currently costs $99 a month, and maybe they'll keep the $99 fee, but add in this ability to have your music automatically streamed, including the music that's already on your Mac or Windows iTunes. Now, the rumor also says that it's going to upgrade your tracks. So, for example, let's say you had a low quality MP3 of some music at, let's say, 96 kilobits per second. The rumor is that Apple is going to see that you have it and then allow you to stream that music from your digital locker at a higher quality bit rate, let's say as a 256 MP3 or 265 MP3. So that would be huge. And I think that would be devastating for both Google and for Amazon if Apple came up with that kind of method for digital streaming, because it'll be just really easy for consumers to have their entire musical collection already up in the cloud without having to upload it. Now, one area that Apple hasn't traditionally done well is in the enterprise, and the enterprise is essentially big business and government customers. Macintoshes have been traditionally a device that consumers have purchased, and Apple has had a devil of a time getting big corporations and big government agencies interested in using Macintosh products or other Apple devices. Well, there's a story out in Electronista this week on May 22nd saying that Apple has made great strides with Macs in the business area recently, while Windows has declined. And the story basically at Electronista says that Needham analyst, and he's a securities analyst who covers Apple, Charlie Wolf, in a research note recently gave a detailed breakdown showing that the Mac carving significantly into Windows PC sales. And basically, Mac shipments grew 66% in the first quarter of 2011, according to Needham, while the total PC market advanced only 4.5%. So Charlie Wolf of Needham says that Apple now has 3% of corporate PCs, a figure it still hasn't seen since spring 1997. So look, even though it grew 66%, imagine that Apple only has 4.5%. Apple only has 3% of the corporate PC market. And actually, that's my belief as to why Apple has so much room for growth. A lot of people wonder, how can Apple as a business grow anymore when it's the second largest capitalized company in the world and has a market capitalization of $350 billion. But look at the markets that Apple still has room to grow in. You know, Microsoft has monopolized and dominated the enterprise market for the last 20 years. Apple only has 3% of corporate accounts, but as consumers start using iPads and iPhones, and those consumers include employees and executives of enterprise and government, they're going to start putting pressure on their corporate IT people to purchase Apple products. And Apple can only go up in terms of market share from 3%. So, you know, it's a good sign that Apple in the last quarter has gone up 66%. And actually, this article is very interesting. It says, in electronics, the government, often one of the hardest segments for Apple to breach, was also seeing rapid growth. Wolf said, while starting from a much smaller point, its sales were up 155.6%, where the overall market was growing by just 2.3%. School sales were virtually flat for Apple, with just 1% gain. So that's very interesting, because government is clearly a big challenge for Apple. Government IT departments are historically very conservative, and you know, all the IT people have been trained on using Microsoft products. So, you know, Apple has a tough road ahead in terms of gaining market share in government customers. So I think this is interesting. I think you're going to see improvement by Apple in the enterprise because, again, it can only go up for Apple. Okay, so if you're looking for something helpful to, you know, cover yourself with security on a Macintosh, a file appeared on the internet that made the rounds, and actually a friend of mine sent this to me, but other people found it also, which is that the National Security Agency of the government, which is the very secretive technology agency that spies electronically on our enemies and opponents and, you know, all sorts of things. Well, it came out with a fact sheet on it's called Mac OS 10.6 Hardening Tips PDF. And this PDF, which you can get at nsa.gov/ia/-files/fact sheets /Mac OS X _10_6 hardening tips.pdf. I'll have this link on the podcast page, and also it's on my blog at maxfuture.com. But it's a very detailed PDF that has very comprehensive instructions for how to, you know, improve security on a Macintosh running Snow Leopard. I'll give you an example. It's divided into different sections. Disable Bluetooth in airport devices. And it gives the example, the best way to disable Bluetooth hardware is to have an Apple certified technician remove it. If this is not possible, disable it at the software level by removing the following files from extension, from the library extensions area. So it just gives really hardcore security instructions. For example, on security pane settings, it says, open the security pane in System Preferences. In the General tab, ensure that the following are checked. Require password 5 seconds after sleep or screensaver begins. Disable automatic login. Use secure virtual memory. Disable location services if present. Disable remote control infrared receiver if present. In the File Vault tab, read the warnings and consider activating File Vault. Consult the Apple Snow Leopard Security Guide for more information. File Vault is recommended for portable systems since it can protect data even if the system is stolen. In the Firewall tab, click Start to turn Firewall on. Next, click on Advance and Enable, and then set it to block all incoming connections. So there's really all sorts of detailed instructions on how to make your Mac incredibly, incredibly, incredibly secure. And I guess that means that NSA employees are getting Macintoshes because, why else would they have these hardening tip? They call them hardening tips for Mac OS X. Other instructions include disabling integrated eyesight and sound input. What's really kind of funny about these instructions is that they're disabling so many things. One wonders, how can anyone even use the computer after it goes through this NSA drill? But look, it's a good primer. You learn a lot of things about the settings and security that you have on your Mac. And look, it's coming from a premier organization, the NSA. Okay, so one of the more interesting types of software that came out this past week or so in the Mac App Store is an application called Hype, Hype, and it's actually a hot seller in the Mac App Store, and it costs $29.95. And basically what Hype is, it's a product that allows you to create HTML5 animations. And the animations look pretty cool. There's a demo video of it at the Hype website. And so what does this mean? Well, for lay people, on the web, there are all these websites that have animations, including games where, graphics move around and things move around and it's kind of active. And that's known as Flash. And the company Adobe makes that Flash software, and it's proprietary. And if you know anything about Steve Jobs, you know that Steve Jobs hates Flash and won't allow Flash to run on iOS devices like the iPad and the iPhone. But Steve Jobs and Apple love HTML5, which is the standard for the websites, the future standard, and HTML5, which is a web developing protocol, allows the ability to have things like animation and video embedded into the website. Well, the story behind Hype is that two people who worked at Apple left Apple to create this company that makes this software. And basically, it's a way to create some animations and easy, and you don't have to use coding, and to create HTML5 animations for your website. So here's what it says, the description. Create beautiful animated and interactive web content with Hype. Hype's HTML5 output works on all modern browsers and mobile devices like iPhones and iPads. No coding required. It has interactivity and animations, and it uses keyframe-based animation system, which brings your content to life. According to Hype, click record, and Hype watches your every move, automatically creating keyframes as needed. Or if you prefer to be more hands-on, manually add and remove and rearrange keyframes to fine-tune your content. It says Hype lets you make as many scenes as needed, and a variety of actions can switch between scenes using smooth transitions. It says that you can use the power of multiple timelines to run animations based on mouse keyboard events. It goes on to say Hype tries to deliver 100% fidelity across all browsers. For example, if the high-performance CSS3 transitions aren't supported, Hype will fall back to JavaScript-based heartbeat animations. And then it goes on and says, when there are no good fallbacks, Hype warns about browser incompatibility so you're never caught by surprise. And one key thing is it has a what you see is what you get scene editor, which is powered by WebKit, the same modern rendering engine that powers Safari. And also what you can do is you can export a self-contained directory that holds the resources, and then upload the directory to your web server, and then copy and paste 3 lines of HTML into your existing website, and you're good to go. And it also says if you want to, you can publish your content to Dropbox public folder for easy sharing. So I think what they mean is this. Like, let's say I wanted to use this HTML5 Flash animation on Tumblr. If I'm reading right, you can export, the hype animation package to Dropbox, make it a public folder, and then use the code from that and put that into Tumblr, and it should still run. So overall, I think people are very interested in this because it could really cause an explosion of HTML5 animations on websites. And who knows, maybe this will lead to creating HTML5 web apps, which then can run as web apps on the iPhone and iPad. But it's really interesting technology. It's only $30. I'm tempted to buy it and play around with it and report on what it can do. Okay, so one thing that should be coming out this summer or the fall is the next iPhone, the iPhone 5. Well, there's a story out that was on Cult of Mac that the French company, French Telecom, said, that it knows that the iPhone 5 will be coming out and that it will be thinner and smaller. So, what to make of this? Well, there's been rumors left and right. It's unclear what's going to happen. Is the next iPhone not coming out till September? Will there be an interim iPhone 4S that's sort of like the iPhone 4 but with extra memory or a better camera? Will that be coming out? But the French Telecom claims that it'll be thinner and smaller, and I think that's right. One theory is that Apple will make the iPhone screen go all the way to the edge of the phone, so you won't have that black trim around the sides. And so Apple could keep the same 3.5-inch diagonal screen size and make the iPhone thinner by knocking off that black side to it. So in other words, the screen went right to the edge of the iPhone. That would make it thinner. You could also make it shorter by chopping off some of the the black body of the iPhone on top and on the bottom. So it's clear that Apple's always striving to make its phones thinner and lighter, and thinner and smaller. So I think that's a credible rumor. I'm not sure if Apple's just going to execute it exactly that way. We'll have to see. Okay, so if you're into Apple history, and it's been a colorful history, well, you're always looking for more stories and more interesting stuff on Apple. Well, Business Insider had an extensive interview with Apple's first CEO. Now, Apple's first CEO was not Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak. They were the founders, and when they got money from Markula, who was the venture capital guy who gave them some startup money, he said he brought in a guy he had worked with to be the first CEO, and that guy, who was like the adult, working with the two Steves, is a guy named Michael Scott, and he apparently stayed with Apple just through the time that Apple had its public offering. And this interview, which I posted 2 days ago on maxfuture.com, I linked to the Business Insider interview, is really interesting. I get the sense from the interview that Steve Jobs was somewhat difficult, but there are colorful stories in there. And if you're looking to build up your knowledge of the Apple lore and Apple history, this interview with Michael Scott is pretty interesting and worth adding to your library of Apple stories. So here's a taste of what's in the article. Business Insider asked Michael Scott, "You were employee number 7 when you came into Apple, right?" He answered, "No, because I assigned the employee numbers I was employee number 7 because I wanted number 7. I was actually employee number 5 at the time. So I was 007, of course, as a joke. Here's another interesting response. The question was, what were your impressions on meeting the two Steves? And by the two Steves, the article means Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. And Michael Scott says, I never got to see the garage. I just saw it at Markula's place up on the hill. Jobs did the talking and Woz was the quiet one, although more lately Woz has found his voice more. In the early days, we were all so busy that it was well partitioned over who did what. Woz was doing circuit board itself. Jobs was handling rest of Apple II. Markula was working on marketing, and I was working on getting us into manufacturing and all the rest of the business parts. The story that unfolds is that Rod Halt was brought in as product engineer, and there were several flaws in Apple II that were never publicized. One thing Halt has to his credit is that he created the switching power supply that allowed us to do a very lightweight computer compared to everybody else's that used transformers. We were using high-speed switching versus the classical transformer, so we were able to get the weight down. But within their first Apple II, when we tried running it warm like you would in Florida or someplace like that, it stopped working. So that was a secret at the time. How do you get it to work all the time? We kept that a trade secret. That was Holt that found that out. If you stuck in a scope probe to try and figure out what was wrong, it started working again, which was very frustrating, and we were against the time schedule to get into production, and we had to freeze the circuit board. He goes on to say, so the other problem we had was where the case itself, which was structured foam, because we couldn't afford the lead time to do hard tooling. We had a lot of trouble with the case when we molded it. It would warp and wouldn't hold its shape. That's one of the things I still remember. In the spring of 1977, Jobs had this Falcon pickup truck, which I don't think is made anymore. So we'd run off to the molding shop to see what was needed in order to get us cases fast enough. You're only taking the first 10 employees, so by June of 1997 we were at 10. In May, at the first company fair, we were at 7, so by August of that year we had a positive cash flow and we're on our way. So, I mean, this is a very lengthy interview, and it's filled with interesting stuff, so you should check it out. Okay, so you remember when Consumer Reports slammed Apple and wouldn't recommend the iPhone 4 over its antenna? Well, Consumer Report now seems to love Apple, particularly its MacBooks. And theloopinsight.com reported this, that Consumer Report recently put the MacBook line of portable computers at the top in every category on Consumer Reports. And according to this article, Apple's 11-inch MacBook Air scored 62 out of 100, taking the top spot in the small laptop section. Scoring at 56, Gateway came in second, while HP came in third with a 49. The article says the 13-inch model of the MacBook Pro, Apple took the top 5 of 7 spots, with Sony and Asus taking the final 2. And then for the 15-inch MacBook Pros, Apple took the top 3 spots, and the competition came in just 3 points behind. And as for the 17-inch MacBook Pro, Apple had a big win. It took the top 2 spots, with the competition sharing the other 6. So, you know, Consumer Reports isn't holding a grudge against Apple. It wouldn't recommend the iPhone 4, but it really says that the MacBook line and the Mac Air line are the top laptops in the industry. Okay, so one of the cooler apps that came out is something called DoAt. And DoAt is a free app, and I'm not sure exactly what it does, but what I do understand it does, it sounds very interesting and innovative. So the app is DO with the at sign, and it's free. And basically, it allows you to search websites for relevant apps, web apps that work for your iPhone, and gives you the content you want. So you can search, for example, Godfather at movies and get something that is relevant. So essentially, DoAt it's like a search engine in an app on the iPhone, or I guess you could use on the iPad too. But it's basically searching for things that are web apps that provide content, and you can do your search like let's say if you use the @ sign, like @news, you can search for sites that are news related. For example, I don't know, let's say something on President Obama. You would do Obama and @news. Similarly, if you're looking for shopping, you would put iPad @shopping. Or if you're interested in music, let's say Katy Perry, you do Katy Perry @music. And I guess it looks for websites that are iPad or iPhone enabled as web apps. So I don't know how popular this is going to be, but it's an interesting concept, a way to quickly look for web apps that have content, music, shopping information that are particularly designed to work with an iPhone, I guess, or an iPad. So it's an interesting search app. Okay, so another interesting app for the Mac, which is only $1, that's in the Mac App Store, is an app called Tombalita. And basically, it's an app for the Macintosh that helps you post to Tumblr. It's only 99 cents. It's very simply and elegantly designed. And, I checked it out. I mean, one of the things that I don't like about it, I don't think it yet has the ability to post multiple photos at one time to Tumblr. That would be a big plus. But it's only 99 cents. And if you post a lot to Tumblr, you may want to check it out. Now, for the last month or so, while Apple's Lion operating system has been in beta and with developers, various websites have been leaking what's in the next version of the Mac operating system. And DoAtDoAt, the unofficial Apple weblog, had a story out saying that Lion, which is the Mac operating system that's going to be released this summer, doesn't have iSync in it. And the article, which came out on May 26, says that iSync is not in there, and the belief is that there's going to be other ways that there's going to be syncing in Lion. So maybe the solution will be that Mobile Me will be upgraded to have better syncing of contacts and information. So look, obviously there's going to be changes in Lion, and here's another little one. Now, Cult of Mac had a story out also that the big investment bank, Deutsche Bank, is now doing an experiment where they're going to have iPhones as a corporate phone and mobile device. And for a long time, the BlackBerry from RIM has dominated enterprise phones. And so for Deutsche Bank to implement using an iPhone is huge. And so we could continue to see iPhones penetrating the enterprise. Where I work, I recently, my BlackBerry broke, and I got like a new one. And I asked the tech people, when are we gonna have the ability to use things like iPhone instead of BlackBerry RIM? Because the problem with the BlackBerries are they're only really good for a couple of things: email and putting things in your calendar and contacts. But in terms of surfing and reading documents, it's kind of useless, at least the BlackBerry that I have. And the iPhone, meanwhile, you can read documents and PDFs, and plus you can use zillions of apps that do all sorts of great things. So it's a pretty good sign that a major investment bank like Deutsche Bank is using iPhones now on the site. Now, on this May 27th, there's a story out from Apple's Apple Insider, which says that Apple now is rumored to be adding widgets and revamp notifications to the next iteration of the iOS operating system for the iPhone and the iPad, and that's going to probably happen soon. WWDC, which is the Apple conference for developers in June, which is 2 weeks away, is going to occur. And one thing I'm pretty sure is going to happen is Apple's going to reveal to developers the next version of iOS. And Apple Insider claims that there will be widgets in the next version of iOS. And what are widgets? Well, on Android, there are widgets. And, right now we have apps on the iPhone. Well, widgets would be these little apps that sort of float around and can be launched, maybe just by double tapping the home button or holding it down. And they could do interesting things, like there could be a widget that just gives you the weather or the time or other information that you want to have really handy, like tweets, for example. And and also there's supposed to be an improvement to the notification system. And there's many ways that notification could be improved. So the coming weeks could be very interesting in terms of seeing what's going to be in iOS 5. Okay, thanks for listening to the Apple podcast. This is Lexstar, and this is a commercial-free podcast, and if you can give a positive review in iTunes, that would be helpful. And you can always email me at maxfuture@gmail.com. And thanks for listening, and see you next week.